The New York Mets finished the first half on a sour note this Sunday, but we have to appreciate the incredible turnaround this team has gone on over the past 6+ weeks. I'll be breaking that down on the show today. And also, the MLB draft, I think they nailed their first round pick with Carson Benge. So we'll talk about that as well on today's Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Booking.com, Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. And we have so much to discuss on today's show. We're going to talk about the front office and how they have been a steady hand guiding this team. And you should feel very comfortable with your standing as a Mets fan moving forward, knowing this front office is going to make all the right decisions, considering the turnaround they've been on lately and the way the draft was handled, because I absolutely love the Mets first round pick. We'll be talking about that in the final segment of the show today. First things first, though, let's discuss the final game of the first half. Rough start from Jose Quintana. Gives up a 2-run homer in the first inning. It was a base hit, then a homer. So he gives up a crooked number before he gets an out. But he settled down, and it felt like he was going to end up turning in a quality start. He retired 12 of the 13 batters he faced after the first home run. Bottom of the fourth inning, the Mets got him a lead. Francisco Alvarez leadoff single. Pete Alonso 2-run homer to tie it. Jose Iglesias drew a walk after Mark Vientos flew out. Tyrone Taylor base hit. Jeff McNeil drew a walk to load the bases. Harrison Bader popped out, and then Francisco Lindor drew a bases loaded walk. But this was the first of many missed opportunities from the Mets because they still had bases loaded with Nimmo up, and he grounded out. So they weren't able to do more in that inning, but still they grabbed the lead back, and it was short-lived because right away in the fifth, Quintana gets up another home run, the first of what turned into a 3-home-run game for Michael Toglia, and that all happened from the fifth inning on, so that's pretty insane. Sixth inning, Quintana gives up a homer to Bretton Doyle to lead off that inning, gets 2 outs, gives up another homer to Toglia, and then he's pulled. So the Mets were down at that point. Seventh inning, Adrian Hauser comes in for the mop-up duty. He gives up a 2-run homer. All of a sudden, it's 7-3 Rockies. The game sort of gets away from the Mets. Bottom of the seventh, Francisco Lindor got a leadoff single. Brandon Nimmo walked after that. Francisco Alvarez, Pete Alonso, Mark Vientos all struck out. And that's where you started to think, all right, the Mets might lose this one. And, credit to the Rockies. They had an offensive outburst, ton of home runs. Hauser gives up another one in the eighth inning. That's something we might have to talk about at some point soon here. Maybe the shine is off on Hauser in the Mets bullpen because he's had a couple of rough appearances in a row. And when you get to a 6-man rotation with Kodai Senga, which should be coming soon here, Senga had a quality rehab start on Sunday, 66 pitches, felt good. So expect Senga to come back after maybe one more rehab start, if not just jump back into the rotation after the break. You can see a world where the Mets are going to be in a situation with a 7-man bullpen soon, and you're going to have some arms that are casualties there. Hauser's one of the names that would be on the bubble, as would Jake Diekman, Adam Ottavino. All those guys are on contracts where you're not going to be able to keep them in the organization. You have to DFA any of them, potentially all of them, if you want to add to this bullpen. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Hauser starting to pitch himself back into that hot seat when it comes to the roster spot. And had they gotten better performance from the bullpen, they probably could have hung in the game. And you can criticize Carlos Mendoza if you want to. I wouldn't, because who else are you going to go to? They went to Phil Maton to get 1 out when they pulled Quintana in the 6th. Beyond that, who else do you really trust? I mean, would Adam Ottavino pitching after Maton been that much better? Maybe. Diekman, Orzi, I don't really know. Yes, you still had Edwin Diaz to use, but you weren't going to use Daniel Nunez. You weren't going to use Jose Budo. So, the Mets were hoping that Hauser could get them to Diaz or get them to Ottavino, potentially, whatever it was. Just didn't work out for them. And the lineup, like I said, they had their opportunities. 8th inning, Leadoff single from Jose Iglesias. Tyron Taylor drew a walk. Jeff McNeil rips a double to score Iglesias, who, by the way, was 4 for 4 in the game. Iglesias was. McNeil had some good at-bats, too, actually. Bader struck out with 2 runners in scoring position, though. Lindor walks to load the bases. Brandon Nimmo grounds out that scores 1. Francisco Alvarez lines out. So that was another opportunity where more runs could have scored. The Mets were on the verge of a big inning, and it just didn't happen. 9th inning, they get a couple guys on. They get the tying run up to the plate as JD Martinez pinch hits for Jeff McNeil. And funny enough, I actually kind of wanted to see Jeff hit, surprisingly, because I thought he had some good at-bats in the game, passed the baton a little bit further down the line. Then maybe you get the pinch hitter, but I'm not here to criticize Mendoza. One swing of the bat ties the game. I get why he went to JD Martinez. JD's just not swinging a good bat right now. I think he's one of the guys that really needs this break. There was all that stuff with his cleats, having the wrong cleats, his ankle. I think he just needs some time off his feet, get ready for a second half push. But overall, you look at where the Mets came from and where they're at right now, and I don't know how you can be upset with a loss on Sunday. I just don't. Yes, in the moments when you're watching the game and Quintana's giving up home runs and Toglia hits 3 home runs in the game and Hauser looks bad and the Mets have opportunities, they don't cash in on him. Yeah, it's frustrating when you're watching it. But as you've now had time and you wake up this morning, I hope that that's not something that's still on your mind. I hope you're not still criticizing Mendoza or whatever it is, because overall, this team just went through a remarkable turnaround where they have saved and turned this into a season. And I think that should be celebrated. And we're going to do that in the next segment here, particularly the way the front office has responded from the moment that Jorge Lopez launched his glove into the stands until now. And the players deserve even more credit, but we've given the players a lot of credit throughout. Lindor, Nimmo, the players only meeting. I've been talking about that stuff for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. The front office deserves their shine, especially on the same day where they made some good draft picks. So we're going to really focus in there in the next segment here. First, though, a word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Booking.com, Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. The Mets are going to be in Miami after the All-Star break this Friday. If you want to check out the games, and I'll be there actually myself on Friday. So if you want to maybe say hello to me, book today on Booking.com on the site or on the Booking.com app. Today's episode is also brought to you by Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros and skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining Supply House's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from a free membership at supplyhouse.com/T-M and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. If you want to stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If we rewind the tape to May 29th, the New York Mets were 22-33 on the season. They were the worst team in baseball in the month of May. They went 7-19 through the first 26 games of that month. Jorge Lopez launched his glove into the stands after that embarrassing loss to the Dodgers. It was a disaster. The Mets were 10 games back of the Braves and weren't even counting the Braves at that point because the thought that the Mets could be in the same conversation with the Braves at any point this season was completely unfathomable. Guess what? I did a podcast about the Mets being able to overtake the Braves a couple of days ago because now that's a reality with what has happened. And since that point, where the Mets were 6 games out of a wild card spot, and they had the third worst record in the National League, the only 2 teams that were better than were the Rockies and the Marlins, 2 teams that aren't even really trying this year. The Mets had every single excuse to fold up shop. David Stearns, new to the job, inherited a team that he had every right to tear down to the studs. You could have made the argument that the best thing for the Mets to do was to play out the string, hope that their guys on one-year deals played really well, and then just sell like crazy. Take advantage of what was going to be a seller's market. What is a seller's market? Second year in a row, using your money, leveraging it on the trade market to build the best farm system in baseball, or a top 5 farm system in baseball. And just completely mail it in. But that front office is competitive, and they're not in the business of giving up seasons until you absolutely should. Because as David Stearns has said many times, the baseball calendar will sort of tell you what to do. When you get to the trade deadline, that's where you decide if you're a buyer or seller. And so the process that you have to put in place is doing everything you can to win each day, to win each series. The New York Mets have had over 50 players on their roster this year. That speaks to the churn of the relievers in particular, but also the different combinations the Mets have tried to find a winning one. And yeah, there are some clear things that are just star related that have led to this success for the Mets. Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, the leadership they've displayed, the way that they have played at all-star levels, even fringe MVP levels for both of these guys throughout this run of success for the Mets, where they have put up numbers as good as any tandem in the National League. They've been amazing. Francisco Alvarez coming off the IL. We have seen the impact of the young catcher. It's been palpable. I mean, it's been huge. So yeah, there's a lot of things, and we're not just going to give the front office all the credit. But when they were down in the dumps, they made moves. Jorge Lopez, you're going to embarrass your organization. You're going to launch your glove into the stands. You're going to have that media session that went so bad, and you can blame the Mets for that if you want to. But regardless, he hadn't pitched well. He didn't conduct himself well. They had to send a message. They cut him. Edwin Diaz wasn't pitching well. They put him on the IL with the shoulder injury, let him rest. A guy that is just trying to get back after a year of missing all baseball action. And that has helped him. Yes, there was the sticky stuff suspension in the middle of this run. But you can't deny Edwin Diaz looked a lot better since that IL stint. And by doing that, you brought up Daniel Nunez, and he has been an absolute find. You make a trade with the Yankees to get Luis Torrens, who has been ridiculously good at controlling the running game. And it seems like every time he gets a start, he hits a double. You call up Jose Iglesias and you send Brett Beatty down. And there's no world where anyone in that front office would have thought that Jose Iglesias would be a sensation on and off the field. He's going to the All-Star game, or at least the Home Run Derby, to perform OMG, because he is that much of a storyline for this baseball season that has now spanned beyond the Mets, as other players around the league are using his song as walk-up music and everything else. His song has been huge, and that's great. He's also hitting .380 with a .417 on-base percentage and a .582 slugging percentage. Has a .999 OPS. He's been unbelievable. He has earned a starting spot in the second half, whether that's at second, sparing Vientos at third base a little bit at times. He has to be on the field at all times because his defense has been spectacular as well. No one could have seen that coming, but guess what? The front office signed him to a minor league deal. Okay, the front office brought him into the organization. And yes, you could say, what were they waiting for? Or maybe they called him up at the exact right time. Sending Beatty down, sending Christian Scott down, guys that are going to be a big part of 2025. If you're turning the page of 2025, you're letting those guys play it out. At a certain point, maybe you're trying to find an early trade to clear out a spot so you can play both Vientos and Beatty. Or still, you're investing more time in the former first-round pick in Beatty, who at one point was a top 20 prospect in baseball, who has had all the hype attached to him. But Mark Vientos started hitting, and so they decided to give him the runway, and he has rewarded them handsomely with that. He's been ridiculously good. So many things went the Mets' way. Other things didn't. During this same stretch, Sean Reed-Foley hit the IL. Drew Smith lost for the season. Brooks Raley lost him earlier in the year and officially got the surgery on his elbow. I mean, there's so many things that have gone bad. Reed Garrett now hitting the IL, and the bullpen has not been great. They're proactive, though, and they were able to make a trade for Phil Maton, who looks to be a piece that's absolutely going to help them in the second half. Meanwhile, you look at what this front office did in the offseason. Some of the signings that were made, the production they've gotten in the first half from Luis Severino and Sean Manaea, two guys that they signed that anybody could have had, that have been healthy all year and have both been huge parts of this rotation. Harrison Bader's hitting 273. Got an OPS over 700. It's actually 20 points better than his career OPS. He's in the 730s. His career OPS is in the 710s. Has a 1.6 wins above replacement according to Fangraphs. Made a great catch today in center field. It's been awesome. Tyrone Taylor, Adrian Hauser. Have they been great all year? No, they've both gone through some stretches where they've been bad. Have they been good depth to acquire for a pitching prospect and Coleman Crow who might not ever amount to anything? Absolutely, that was a good trade. Yes, there's been bad moves. Jake Diekman, Adam Ottavino, those signings have not panned out. But this front office has continued to tinker, and they have pushed forward trying to win, and the players have rewarded them. And now this team is in a position to make a run this year. And you could say, oh, that wasn't the best thing for the franchise long term. But you know what? There's a draft. There's international signing. There's a farm system that's already in place that's been much improved. And there's a lot of ways to get better as an organization. It's about setting the right process from the top down from jump. This is the first baseball cycle, as David Stearns has said. And you don't want to spend a baseball cycle trying to lose games. You want to try to win games until the team proves to you that they aren't good enough. And this team has proved that they are good enough. And so now it's going to be their first deadline to make moves, and we'll be covering that over the next week here in particular, and of course the next couple of weeks, but I'm going to have a lot of deadline shows. As a Mets fan, you have to be really at ease with seeing what David Stearns has done in this short period of time, because the Mets of last year, when they saw some adversity, it crumbled. It absolutely crumbled. This year, every time where there's been a little bit of adversity, they have risen above it. And throughout this stretch, they went 27-13 over 40 games. They jumped 6 teams in the standings. You look at this series breakdown. They won 8 of the series that they played. They split 4. They only lost 1. That was the series against the Astros, who have been really good as well. They've also completely flipped the narrative of their season over this time period. And if you look at those 4 splits the Mets had, they also had 4 sweeps, which really do counteract those splits. And that's how you get to the 27-13 record and you shoot up the standings. Because if you pair a split with the sweep, it's almost like a series win. So if you look at it that way, 17 series played, 16 of them essentially went the Mets' way when you look at trying to win 2 out of every 3 games, and then you lost 1. That is incredible stuff from this team. And if you're not bought in on the Mets yet, you're just a pessimist and you're refusing to hop on the bandwagon, because it feels like it's going to be a fun ride down the stretch. And I can't wait to be there with you guys every single day as we cover this 2024 Mets team that has just been a roller coaster, but a really damn fun one. Speaking of this 2024 Mets team, there's a draft that has to take place each year. And I think the Mets hit an absolute home run with their first-round pick, Carson Benge. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute, how the front office is in good hands for the draft as well. So we'll go through it. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. If you want to go to the Mets versus Marlins series in Miami, or just the next time they're up at Citi Field, make sure you use Game Time. And here's my strategy. I told you I'm going to the game on Friday. I will not buy tickets until I am outside the ballpark. I'll park in the garage. I'll pull open the Game Time app, and I'll scan for deals, because Game Time is the place for last-minute tickets. I'll take a view of the different seats that are available. You can see what the sight lines are. You can view your seat before you purchase, and they have all-in pricing up front. So you don't have to be surprised after you pick your seat and you go to check out, where were these fees? They're right there up front. They're shown to you so you know what to expect. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime some news breaks on the Mets. You can also ask me questions anytime and take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, speaking of the front office, One of the big moves this offseason was bringing in Chris Gross. Chris Gross was running the drafts in Houston with the Astros. The Astros have drafted very well. The Mets, beneficiaries of Chris Gross's drafts, when they traded Justin Verlander to Houston at the deadline last year, getting Ryan Clifford and Drew Gilbert, guys that have sort of outperformed where they were drafted. And that's something the Astros have continued to do, just find gems in the draft. So you bring him in. He's now heading up all the scouting for the Mets. And having him in place with a scouting department that was already pretty solid. Tommy Tanos still with the organization. There's a lot of others. The Mets have a great infrastructure in place to continue to do what they've done in recent years, which has been pretty solid when it comes to drafting and even developing players. But they've gotten even better. I mean, the developing part, of course, you've seen what the pitching has done this year. That is right there proof of the pitching lab and how that is already starting to benefit this organization. But now you have a really highly sought after executive in Gross that was able to be brought in because you got David Stearns. Once you have that guy, the pillar at the top, you get better talent from the industry to filter in. And I just think because of that, you're going to see the Mets nailing their drafts moving forward and continuously finding new players to plug in. Because the reality is, if you're a competitive team for a long time, like we've seen the Dodgers, the Astros, some of these franchises, there's a lot of churn with your prospects. You got to trade guys, okay? Because you are going to have to, at deadlines, supplement your roster. And so, yeah, you could say, oh, the Mets should have sold this year because that could have stockpiled things. Guess what? You're going to have to, over the years, continue to stockpile just by drafting well and signing well. I think the Mets are in a great position to do that moving forward with how they have structured their front office, the people that are there, and again, having the young but very accomplished executive at the top of it all in Stearns, and now Chris Gross being under him, but leading the scouting department. I just think this Mets franchise is in great hands with the draft. So now let's actually talk about the draft. The New York Mets were picking at number 19 in the draft. And basically, for those of you who aren't aware how this works, they do rounds 1 and 2 on Sunday. Monday, it's 3 through 10. And then I guess on Tuesday, it would be 11 through 20 throughout this 2024 MLB draft. So the Mets were slated to pick at 19 because their first round pick gets docked 10 slots because of being a luxury tax paying team from last year. So 19 is not as ideal as a top 10 pick, but still a place where you can get a lot of talent. And I think the Mets had an absolute home run with Carson Benge. 21 years old. He is a two-way player from Oklahoma State. If that sounds familiar, the Mets last year drafted Nolan McLean, another two-way player from Oklahoma State. But these guys are different. For McLean, it was always sort of rumored and speculated that the hitting would probably fall by the wayside. The pitching was something that he was really drafted for. With Benge, it's the opposite. He's more a hitter than a pitcher. Right now, it seems like they might keep him as a two-way guy. He wants to keep trying it for now, similar to McLean. But funny enough, Benge let the cat out of the bag, which I think if you were paying attention, you probably would have figured, which is that Nolan McLean is not a two-way player anymore. He last hit on June 20th. He is just going to focus on pitching at an 849 OPS in high A, double A, 565 OPS. So McLean, no longer a two-way player. Benge for now is, but really what you have to be excited about with Carson Benge, it's the bat. So he hit 335 this past season, 444 on base, 665 slug, had 18 home runs, 2 triples, 24 doubles in 61 games. Meanwhile, he pitched to a 3.16 ERA in 37 innings. So there is something there with the arm, but really I'm excited about seeing that arm in right field potentially. You look at the future for the Mets, and not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but you have Drew Gilbert, who could be a center fielder. You have Jet Williams, who could be a center fielder. If you wanted to, you have Luis Acuna, who could be a center fielder. And now you add a guy in Carson Benge, who could be a right fielder with a cannon of an arm. That is exciting stuff. He will be a plus defender in right, but Chris Gross, after drafting him, called him a 5-tool center fielder, has the potential to be a 5-tool center fielder. I am thrilled about this pick also because I take all of my sort of cues when it comes to the scouting of players and all of the prospect stuff from the company I work for in Just Baseball, where I'm the managing editor. And we have Aram Layton, who is the co-founder of our company, who is as big of a prospect head as you're going to find. He spends so much time on the draft, on the minor leagues, just studying video on these guys. and he ranked the top 30 prospects in this draft. Do you know where Carson Benge ranked? Number 11. And if you were watching our stream with Just Baseball, as it was leading up to the pick, Arm said, I think the best player on the board is Carson Benge. The Mets got the best player on the board from our write-up on Just Baseball, which I will link in the episode description today, looking at the top 30 prospects in this draft, where, again, you can find Benge at number 11. Here are the strengths that he points out. He says, another legitimate two-way prospect. Benge was effective as a swingman for Oklahoma State with a low 90s fastball and a trio of secondaries, following up a standout redshirt freshman season. He missed 2022 with Tommy John. So with an even more impressive sophomore campaign, Benge is looking like one of the more intriguing outfield prospects in this class. After struggling to elevate in 2023, Benge slashed his ground ball rate by more than 10%, more than doubling his home run rate total to 18, while increasing his slug by 130 points. Benge really shows off his athleticism in the box, using his base well while creating plenty of whip with the barrel. He has great hand-eye with impressive swing variance to get to pitches in tough spots, boasting a zone contact rate of 92% and an overall contact rate of 84%. Now, all of that, again, written by Arm Layton on the site, but I wanted to read you the scouting report to give you a sense of what this guy can be for the New York Mets, because the thing that Arm is getting at here when he's talking about zone contact rate and contact rate, it's barrel control. It's a guy that has a good feel to hit, and a guy that has been a two-way player that had to rehab from Tommy John when he was in college. So now, yeah, he might pitch a little bit. He might be a Noel McLean style. He starts off next year potentially in high A, or we'll see if we see him at all this year. But he makes a couple starts or has a couple appearances out of the bullpen, gets up to double A, and eventually just abandons the pitching and focuses on the hitting, because if he can just focus on that, what Arm talks about here as he gets to the outlook, he says, Benge is a unique athlete who may just be scrapping the surface of the player he can ultimately be. He has a wiry build and could probably add some strength without losing any speed. It's not uncommon for two-way players to add mass upon shifting their focus from the mound. Adding strength could facilitate a simpler operation in the box. Benge is more of a projection play than the other college bats in this range, but he has the potential for a plus hit in at least average power while playing a viable center. He talks about him being, an above average runner, being able to play right field, if not stick in center. All this stuff talks about a patient approach as a hitter, walking more than he struck out when he was at Oklahoma State, and having a low chase rate as well. What you're looking at here is good plate discipline, good barrel control, and the potential to add on more power if he builds some strength, which if he just becomes a position player, that will likely happen, where all of a sudden a plus hit tool and setting yourself up with good discipline where you're getting yourself in good hitters counts. Also seeing that progression in college where he went from hitting the ball on the ground a lot to lifting more and already tapping into his power. He was asked during his media session what he wanted to get better at. He talked about being able to turn on the inside pitch and being able to lift more. So all of that is projecting forward a guy that is going to check the box on defense. He's going to have the speed. He's very athletic. He's got a good hit tool, so you don't have to worry about that. If the power's there as well, and he's got an arm as a pitcher, it's a five-tool player. I think that's got number 19. He could turn into one of the steals of this draft. I absolutely love this pick by the New York Mets. And to make it better, you also have a new bromance, because he and Noel McLean, again, both two-way players from Oklahoma State. In his media session, Carson Benge said that they just clicked right away, both being gingers and two-way guys. It was just quick friends, and they are still, tearing up Rocket League as they play whatever it is, PlayStation or Xbox or PC, whatever. They play games online together still to this day. They've been talking a lot throughout this draft process. McLean has been talking up the Mets organization, and Benge was clearly very excited to have been selected by the Mets. He couldn't really hold back that excitement when you watched him talk to the media. So it was one of the teams he was most looking forward to potentially joining. And here he is. So I think the Mets, for having fallen 10 slots, they were able to get a player that has a really high ceiling, a player that could progress quickly because he's a college bat. It might take a little bit more time than a college bat that hit for 3 years in college and didn't have a lost season mixed in there, but he has all the tools. And if he just focuses on hitting, which I think will come, maybe not right away, but at some point next year or the following year, I think you're going to find out that this guy might just be a huge piece in the Mets' future. We won't know until they start playing games, right? And that's why, as the draft progresses, I'm not going to give you a detailed analysis on every pick 1 through 20. But the first round pick, you got to talk about, and an absolute steal, it feels like, to end up getting this guy after falling. Awesome stuff for the Mets, and hopefully they continue to find some other gems throughout this draft. And I will be talking about them, just not as in as much length and detail as I'm giving you on Benge. Also, though, there was a second round pick, so let's not leave Jonathanantui out of it. Shout out to my friend Chris, who might be listening to this. He's a truck driver, and he's not even a Mets fan. Maybe he's now turning into a Mets fan. Hasn't even been the biggest baseball fan, but I think he misses me, so he tunes into the show. Just for him. Tucci! Anyway, that's a joke for one person. I'm sorry. But hopefully Chris is listening. Now, Santucci had a 3.41 ERA at Duke this past year in 13 starts. He's a left-handed pitcher, 58 innings pitched, 90 strikeouts. So you're looking at a guy who's got some real upside coming from the left side. And you look at the Mets system, not a lot of left-handed pitchers. Go through the top prospects in the system. Christian Scott, who's up. Brandon Sproat, who we talked about a lot in yesterday's show. If you missed that, check that out. I talked about Brandon Sproat could be a secret weapon for the Mets this year. I have a follow-up article. I was trying to get it out on Sunday, but it's probably going to be Tuesday release at Just Baseball and Sproat. But again, top two prospects in the system, right-handed. Blade Tidwell, right-handed. Jonathan, right-handed. Nolan McLean, right-handed. So there's not a top-end left-handed pitching prospect in this system right now. And all of a sudden, you might have one here with Jonathanantui. So we'll see exactly how he progresses and everything else. We'll learn more about him as he really gets into the system, gets in the pitching lab and all that. But when you can strike out 90 guys in 58 innings and you got a projectable arm that scouts really like, it's something for fans to be excited about in the future. We'll see exactly how long it takes him to go through his development. But so far, so good in this draft. 2 picks in. You can't grade it too much, but when it comes to the bench pick, I'm giving the Mets an A. Santucci, I'd be lying if I said I knew enough about it to give you a grade on it. I'm not going to just say, oh, yeah, it's a B+. Like, what does that mean? But what I will tell you is I like that they're getting a high upside left-handed pitcher for a system that can use one. And we'll see how they continue to progress throughout this draft and make their other selections. We'll be talking about that throughout this week and a ton of deadline stuff. You got Pete Alonso competing in the Home Run Derby on Monday night. So I'll, of course, break that down on Tuesday's show. But I also want to talk about the narrative around Pete Alonso and how he has almost been a shield for Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo this year. Not necessarily a knowing one or a willing one, but that's sort of how things are broken out. I just want to talk about the season that he's having. Of course, there's all the all-star drama, but can he turn it around a little bit more in the second half? So we're going to do a lot of stuff on Alonso tomorrow, as well as covering the draft. So make sure you check that out. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Appreciate all of you for helping me get to that goal of 9,000 subs by the All-Star break. The next goal, 10,000 subs by the end of the season. So continue to subscribe. If you want to be a Locked On Mets Insider, find a link in the episode description to go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. If you want to follow me on social media, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today, which is streaming 24/7 on both YouTube and Amazon Fire TV.